There is a moment in the Gospel of Mark, the earliest Gospel, the one written closest to living memory, where Jesus heals someone and then says something that has puzzled translators for 2,000 years. He tells them to be silent, not just quiet, not just discreet. He uses a specific Greek word, a word that appears again and again in the exorcism accounts, a word that, in the English translations sitting in most homes right now, gets rendered as something like, "Tell no one," or "Keep this quiet," or "Say nothing about this." And so the tradition reads it as a secrecy command, a PR strategy. Jesus managing the crowds, Jesus not wanting to become too famous too fast. That is the reading everyone inherits, but there is a crack in it. If Jesus was only asking for secrecy, why does he use the same word when he speaks to demons? The word is phimo, in Greek, phimo, transliterated, phimo, standard lexical definition, to muzzle, to silence, to close the mouth forcibly. That is already different from tell no one. Tell no one is a request, a social instruction, something you give to a person exercising discretion. Phimo is something else. It is applied to a mouth that cannot simply choose silence on its own. It is applied to a voice that must be shut from outside. It is applied to a source. Bill Mounce in his Greek-English dictionary gives the primary gloss as to muzzle, to silence, and specifically notes the physical, forcible quality of the action. This is not polite restraint. This is the closing of a mechanism. Liddell Scott goes further. The broader semantic field of phimo covers not just silencing a person, but stopping the operation of something that produces sound. It carries the sense of sealing, of rendering inoperative. Now look at where else this word appears. In 1 Corinthians 9:9, Paul quotes the law about not muzzling an ox while it treads the grain. The Greek there is phimoseis, you shall not muzzle. The ox is not being asked to be quiet. The ox's mouth is being physically prevented from closing on the grain it is working in. The word describes a physical seal on a physical mechanism. Now hold that. In Matthew 22:12, when the man without a wedding garment is confronted at the wedding feast, the text says he was phimo, he was silenced, rendered speechless, unable to produce sound. Not instructed to be quiet, stopped, the voice mechanism closed. Same word, same field. Now return to Mark 1:25. Jesus is standing before a man in the synagogue, a man with what the text calls an unclean spirit, pneuma akatharton, and Jesus says, "Phimotheti, be muzzled, be sealed, be rendered non-operative, and then come out of him." The traditional reading flattens this into a simple command for silence. But the word Jesus uses is not a silence command, it is a sealing command. It is the language of closing a frequency, of shutting down something that is broadcasting. Read that again. He is not telling the spirit to be quiet on its way out. He is sealing the signal first, then commanding the exit. That sequence is not incidental. The sequence is the mechanism. And now this, the same word phimo, appears not just in the exorcism accounts, it appears in the healing commands. Mark 7:36, Jesus heals a deaf man. He puts his fingers in the man's ears. He spits. He touches the man's tongue. He looks up to heaven and says a word the text gives us in Aramaic, Ephatha, be opened. And then, after the healing, he phimoed them. He charged them to silence, not tell no one. He sealed the event. Why would a healer seal the frequency after the healing? Mark 5:43, Jairus' daughter. Jesus raises her, and immediately, before anything else, he charged them strictly that no one should know. The Greek there is not a simple instruction. It is the same sealing language, the same closure of the broadcasting mechanism. If this were only PR management, the word choice is bizarre. You don't use the word for physically muzzling an ox when you want someone to keep a secret, unless what Jesus was sealing wasn't information. unless what he was sealing was a frequency. This is where the Gnostic tradition steps in with something the synoptic commentaries almost never say. The archons in Gnostic cosmology operate through voice, not metaphorically, literally. The Apocryphon of John describes the archonic construction of the human body as a process of naming. Each archon contributes a principle, and the contribution is given through sound, through a spoken assignment of power. The material world is understood, in the Gnostic framework, as a standing vibration, a frequency that holds the pneumatic spark in place. The archons do not hold the soul with chains, they hold it with a signal, and the signal requires a source. An unclean spirit, pneuma akatharton, is not simply an evil being who happened to move into someone. In the Gnostic reading, it is a broadcasting node. It is a localized amplifier of the archonic frequency. It is something that takes the standing vibration of the kenoma, the deficiency, and runs it through a human nervous system. The unclean spirit does not just torment, it broadcasts. And Jesus, the one who carries the pleroma, the fullness, the light before light, does not argue with the broadcast. He seals it. Phimo. Shut the signal down. Then and only then command the carrier to leave. The order matters, because the order is the technology. You do not cast out what is still broadcasting. You seal the frequency first. Then the carrier has nothing to transmit. Then the exit is clean. This is not a metaphor for a pastoral counseling technique. This is a description of a mechanism, a specific, repeatable, ordered mechanism that Jesus used in case after case, and then with the same word instructed the witnesses not to amplify afterward. Because amplification works both ways. If you broadcast the healing, you reopen the frequency. If you keep the seal, the healing holds. The structural detail that almost every commentary misses is this. In the exorcism accounts, phimo is in the passive imperative. That is not a minor grammatical note, that is the hinge. The passive imperative in Greek is a command for the subject to receive an action, not to perform one. Jesus is not saying to the spirit, "You be quiet." He is saying, "Let yourself be muzzled. Receive the sealing, be sealed by what I am carrying into this space." The spirit is being commanded to submit to a force that is already present, not to comply with a request, to receive a vibration that shuts it down. That is the mechanism no one names. The silence is not the result of Jesus shouting louder than the spirit. The silence is the result of Jesus introducing a frequency that makes the archonic signal unable to sustain itself. The pleroma does not compete with the kenoma, it renders it inoperative. Phimo, the single most important word in the exorcism accounts, the word hiding in the translation, "be quiet," the word that turns a silencing into a sealing, a pastoral moment into a vibrational act, the reframe in a single sentence. When Jesus said phimo, he was not asking for silence, he was transmitting a frequency that sealed the archonic signal at its source. If you want to go deeper into the original language every week, subscribe. This is what we do here. Now bring this out of the first century. Bring it into the room you are sitting in right now. You have felt this. There is a frequency that runs beneath certain thoughts, beneath certain patterns of anxiety, of self-diminishment, of the voice that speaks before you can stop it, the one that says, "You are not enough," the one that says, "This will not work," the one that catalogs your failures at 3 a.m. with the precision of a prosecuting attorney. That voice is not you. You know it is not you because it does not sound like you when you are most awake, when you are most still, when you have been in silence long enough that something else begins to surface, something quieter, something that does not argue, something that simply is. That voice, the prosecuting voice, runs on a signal. It requires a source. It requires something to carry it. And the thing the Gnostic tradition is naming, the thing Jesus is demonstrating with phimo, is that the signal can be sealed, not argued with, not overcome by willpower or positive thinking or self-improvement, sealed, rendered inoperative, not because you are stronger than it, but because you carry something it cannot coexist with. The pleroma is not louder than the archonic signal. It is of a different order entirely. When the fullness enters the deficiency does not get defeated. It gets dissolved. You have walked into a room sometimes, or a conversation, or a moment of stillness after long noise, and felt something in you go quiet that had been loud for days. Not because you resolved anything, not because you figured anything out, because something in the quality of that space sealed the frequency. That was not coincidence, that was phimo. That was the mechanism working without you having the word for it. This is a map, not a medical claim. This is not a prescription for mental health treatment. But it is an ancient description of a mechanism that the body knows, that the awareness knows, even when the theology doesn't name it. What changes when you see it this way? The voice is not you. The voice is a signal, and you are not trying to be louder than the signal. You are trying to introduce the frequency that makes the signal unable to sustain. You already know how to do this. You have already done this. You simply didn't have the word. Now here is the practice. It is called the phimo practice. It draws directly from 3 Greek mechanisms uncovered in this script. Phimo, the sealing, pneuma, breath as carrier, and the passive imperative, receiving rather than performing. This is not a meditation in the generic sense. This is a structured enactment of the mechanism Jesus used. 5 minutes, tonight. Step 1. Locate the signal. Sit in stillness for 60 seconds. Do not try to quiet your thoughts. Let them run. You are not quieting anything yet. You are listening for the loudest recurring voice, the one that returns, the prosecuting voice, the self-diminishing voice, the anxious loop. Name it briefly in your mind. This is the signal. You are not the signal. Step 2. Do not argue with the signal. This is critical. Every word you spend arguing with the voice is transmission. You are feeding the frequency by engaging it. Instead, withdraw your attention from the content entirely. Do not respond to what it says. Let it speak into a room you have left. Step 3. Introduce the breath as carrier. Breathe in slowly to a count of 4. Hold for 4. Breathe out to a count of 8. On the exhale, let the word phimotheti move through your awareness. Not as a shout, as a seal. You are not commanding the voice. You are receiving, passive imperative, the frequency that renders the signal inoperative. Repeat this 4 times. Step 4. Notice what remains. After the 4th breath, sit in complete silence for 30 seconds. Do not check whether it worked. Do not assess the result. Simply notice what is present in the space the signal was occupying. Something quieter. Something that does not argue. Something that simply is. That is not nothing. That is what was always underneath the signal. That is the pneumatic spark the archons were working so hard to drown out. There was a man in a synagogue in Capernaum who had lived for years under a frequency that was not his own. And a voice entered the room that did not argue, did not debate, did not perform a ritual of escalation. It simply sealed phimothe. And in the silence that followed, in the space where the signal had been, something that had been bound for years walked out of him, and he was free. The word was never about secrecy. It was never a PR strategy. It was a technology carried in a single syllable, demonstrated in a synagogue, repeated across healings, hidden in a translation, waiting for the moment someone would read the Greek and see the machine. The machine still works. The frequency has not changed. And now you have the word.